Romney heads right. Let's play hardball. Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington. Let me start tonight with this. Mitt Romney. I remember when George Wallace said there's not a dime's worth of difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. Well, today, for those paying attention, there's not a dime's worth of difference between Mitt Romney and the Republican fringe. Sarah Palin accused the president of palling around with terrorists. Romney today accuses Obama of sympathizing with the attackers in the Mideast. Romney not only exploits the language of the right, he's enjoying it. The birthers say Obama isn't one of us, wasn't born here, is some kind of Muslim mole. Romney says Obama sympathizes with the Muslim killers. Well, today the state of Kansas is deciding whether to let Obama's name even appear on the ballot. The birthers are still at it. The Kansas Secretary of State wants more evidence of the president's legitimacy to run. His birth certificate apparently isn't enough. Driving the wedge deeper, Romney plays the welfare card. His new ally, Newt Gingrich, talks of our food stamp president. And one Republican-dominated state after another tries to limit minority voting, all in the cause of making out the president as some sort of the other, the foreigner who needs, in the words of Romney's surrogate John Sununu, to, quote, learn how to be an American. Well, the campaign is coherent, it's comprehensive, and has all purposes to convince the working-class white guy that Obama is not one of us. He's one of them, a foreigner, a usurper in league with the country's enemies. And Mitt Romney's right out there overseeing every word of it. Cynthia Tucker is a Pulitzer Prize-winning syndicated columnist, and Ron Reagan's an MSNBC political analyst. I just want to start with this, Cynthia. Watching it all, as I've just described it, everything going on, the voter suppression, the lingo, the attack on the president, sympathizing with the bad guys. I have never heard such a coherent, comprehensive effort to describe a guy as not really an American, as being one of the enemy, or in league with the enemy at least. Your thoughts?
Chris, it's the Southern strategy writ large. This is all about appealing to racially resentful whites. And I have to tell you, I have been very disappointed and surprised by Mitt Romney's running his campaign this way. I met him back in 2007 when I was still editorial page editor at the Atlanta Constitution. He seemed smart, savvy, moderate, reasonable, and honorable. But I have to tell you, once he started running those outrageous ads on welfare, I knew that he had put his conscience, if he has one, in a blind trust for the rest of this campaign. Not only are they a clear effort to run, again, the Southern strategy writ large. This is all about telling racially resentful whites that Obama wants to change the work requirements so that black people don't even have to work to get government benefits. That's what the ads say. It's an outrageous lie. On top of everything else, it's a lie.
Ron, go ahead. Talk about the whole thing. This whole thing about what happened, the horror that happened in Libya. We'll talk about the president's wonderful performance in a moment. But this way they're attacking Obama, it's not as if he left his guard down. It's as if he's sympathizing with the enemy. It's like they're portraying him as the other. It's not just an argument over competence or strength. It's over loyalty.
Well, indeed, and Cynthia is right that this is the Southern strategy writ large. Look, Chris, real substantive political leaders in America, presidents, for instance, like FDR in the 30s, or you could say Ronald Reagan in the 80s, tend to remake their parties in their own images, around their own core beliefs. Mitt Romney doesn't appear to really have a core that you can build anything around. And so, as a result, the party remakes him in its image. And the party, the Republican Party right now, is dominated by this, you call them a fringe, but it's a larger chunk than that, these kind of Tea Party folks. And part of their thing is they demand fealty. You have to adopt their delusional worldview, which includes things like Obama is a Muslim Manchurian candidate who really hates America, and he's all about destroying the country. You have to blow the dog whistle constantly to reassure those people that you buy into that, and that is what Romney is doing, and we've seen what horrible trouble it's gotten him into with Egypt and Libya now.
Well, the dismaying, if not terrifying thing to watch is the way that a lot of moderate white people, Republicans and Democrats, just sit there and say they don't hear the whistle. Well, anyway, I noticed Listen to Republicans talking about Obama this week after the American deaths in Libya, the language of the other, portraying the president as siding with the enemy. On Tuesday night, RNC chair Reince Priebus tweeted, quote, Obama sympathizes with attackers in Egypt. Sad and pathetic. Wednesday morning, Romney doubled down on his earlier statement that the president had sympathized with the attackers. Let's watch.
I also believe the administration was wrong to stand by a statement sympathizing with those who had breached our embassy in Egypt, instead of condemning their actions. It's never too early for the United States government to condemn attacks on Americans and to defend our values. I think it's a terrible course for America to stand in apology for our values. That instead, when our grounds are being attacked and being breached, that the first response of the United States must be outrage at the breach of the sovereignty of our nation.
Well, there's no space between this kind of talk and what we heard from Sarah Palin in the campaign 4 years ago. Catch her act.
We see an America of exceptionalism. Yes, USA, USA. Our opponent is someone who sees America as imperfect enough to pal around with terrorists who targeted their own country.
Well, this gets back to you, Ron. I want you to take off here because you did, and we'll get back to Cynthia, obviously, but it seems to me, Ron, you've hit something here. Instead of leading, he's shrinking down into something smaller than he began the campaign as. I can be a crazy, too. I can be a fringy, too. I can talk like Sarah Palin, because that seems to be the language it takes to win a Republican constituency. It's pretty sad to watch somebody get smaller as the campaign goes on, reaching down to the people who think small and think everybody else is a foreigner but them, or they're a different ethnic group, or they're black and I'm white, or whatever the game they're playing in their heads is. Somehow that justifies hatred.
Well, and the irony of this for Mr. Romney, I think, is that he's doing this to further his own ambitions. He thinks that his words ultimately don't have any real meaning. He can say whatever he needs to in the moment in order to get himself into the White House. But people looking at this, people who he needs to have vote for him, see a man without principle, see a man with no core, and see a man who is decidedly, appallingly unpresidential. This business in Libya just recently, this was an opportunity. He had no real responsibility, of course, but it was an opportunity for him to sit in the big chair, to look presidential, to do things say things that presidents do or should say. And he couldn't do it. He had to once again cater to this delusional far right, which has a completely twisted nonsense view, not just of foreign policy, but of the universe we live in.
Well, unfortunately, the parallel universe you're describing has moved into ours. And the latest on the birther front, here it is in Kansas. The State Objections Board is discussing removing the President of the United States from the November ballot following a complaint from a Kansan claiming Obama is not a natural-born citizen. Who's on that Objections Board? 3 Republicans, including Kansas Secretary of State and Mitt Romney supporter Chris Kobach, who told the Topeka Capital Journal, quote, I don't think it's a frivolous objection. I do think the factual record could be supplemented here. Well, don't forget the president's mother was from Kansas. Cynthia, there they go again. Mitt Romney, by the way, just a few weeks ago bragged that he hadn't been asked about his birth certificate. Let's catch this slur in action one more time.
Now, I love being home in this place where Ann and I were raised, where both of us were born. Ann was born at Henry Ford Hospital. I was born at Harper Hospital. No one's ever asked to see my birth certificate. They know that this is the place that we were born and raised.
Well, that's been described after a fact as a joke. It's a slur at least. But we see now that the so-called joke of birtherism continues in Kansas, the birthplace of his mother, the president's mother. They're just pushing this thing. Cynthia.
Chris, this is another opportunity for Romney to show that he's a leader, and he's failed. He could stand up and say, this is nonsense. This is outrageous. I want the Kansas Republican Party, the Secretary of State in Kansas, to know that Barack Obama belongs on the ballot in Kansas. He has not done that. This is another test of leadership that he has failed. You know, John McCain in 2008 called out the fringe elements. He said, no, we're not going to sit here and say that the president wasn't born in this country. Mitt Romney seems unable to do that. Ron, your father, when Jimmy Carter was unable to get the hostages out of Iran, your father said this is a time for all Americans to stand together. He didn't take that opportunity to bash Carter. But Mitt Romney is unable to show that kind of leadership. He has failed his 3 a.m. test.
Yes.
You know, I just saw the clip.
Chris,
I just saw the clip of President Reagan doing just what Cynthia described so well. In the midst of the horror, right after Desert One failed, those guys were killed in an incredibly difficult challenge to get the hostages out. He just said, you know, this is a time where the only words we speak should be few, and they should be prayers. Mm-hmm. That's what he said. It's a question
of judgment, and it's a question of character. And I'm afraid Mitt Romney has shown a lack of both this last week.
Yeah, well, I don't like the smell of this, the way they're playing this birther card. I don't like the smell of this gaming that you actually think you get votes by accusing the president of basically being on the other side of a horrendously tragic situation involving the deaths of our patriots over there. And to say this guy's on the other side, our president, is really bad news for our democracy. Anyway, thank you, Ron Reagan. I think you nailed it. Cynthia Tucker, as always, thanks for coming on with your passion and journalistic understanding of what's going on this time. And it is something to pay attention to this past week. The violent protests sparked by that video, by the way, denigrating Mohammed, spread to more than a dozen countries today. Clashes broke out from Europe to India, and some of the worst violence occurred in Tunisia, where demonstrators stormed the U.S. Embassy. Police there said at least 3 protesters were killed and dozens more were wounded. All this despite pleas for calm by world leaders, including the Islamist president of Egypt. Meanwhile, here at home, there was a moving ceremony at Andrews Air Force Base. I mean, something else. As the flag-draped coffins of the 4 Americans killed in Libya were brought home and were met by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and President Obama, both of whom spoke in a somber and moving ceremony covered live by all the cable networks.
The flag they served under now carries them home. May God bless the memory of these men who laid down their lives for us all. May God watch over your families and all who love them. And may God bless these United States of America.